Hello, thank you for joining me today to explore informal assessment strategies. My name is Lisa Gilchrist. I think one of the reasons that we want to use informal assessment strategies as a teacher is because it gives a teacher a chance to see how learners are progressing during the learning, and it's part of that formative understanding of the process that learners undertake. So the technique I'd like to talk about today is called pros, cons, and questions. And it is actually as simple as it sounds. I love that about it. Learners consider a topic or a situation and then generate a list of pros, cons, and things they need to know more about. It's a technique that addresses most of the key principles for teaching best practices. It supports collaborative learning, not only between the learners, but between the teacher and the learners too. There's variable ways to approach it, differing results that you can see. It teaches learners to make evaluations and judgments and assessments in a higher order sense, and it supports a respectful learning environment development where everyone in the classroom can participate and ensure that there are ways to bring in diverse viewpoints and values. So how, when, where, and why we use this tool as a teacher matters. It makes a difference. And part of it matters because learners need time to think about the topic. So thoughtful planning for this approach does make a difference. Many issues that could be discussed have a range of perspectives and will have different considerations depending on the composition of the classroom, the level of learner, the depth and breadth of the subject matter. Of course, as a tool, it's not perfect for every scenario and situation. Unless a very simplistic example is used, learners need to have a solid familiarity with the topic. They need to be able to understand not only what the key elements are, but be able to explore them in terms of factors like complexity, priority, or even assessing the risk level of a particular option. Next, people need to have an openness to explore. Two things can be true and false at the same time, so considering what others might be thinking, seeing, or experiencing requires an openness to looking at new ideas for the learners. It is a flexible tool that can be used in many different learning environments and levels. The preparation is simple too for both learners and teachers. A teacher who is a subject matter expert can readily develop the prompts and analyze the potential responses. The work is simpler for learners. They can respond in point form, they can complete charts, and they don't need to necessarily worry about the level of writing skills that a learner might have. I think one of the other advantages is that you can use a scaffolding model for this so that you can always give positive feedback to a learner. So at the base level, you can have learners brainstorm a list of many factors that would include pros and cons. And then to help them narrow it down and build their skill set, you can ask them to choose the top 3 most critical or most important, depending on the type of criteria that you want them to look at. It can also be very engaging, as the discussion and question development can encourage conversation back and forth between learners within the classroom. The questions can be used as an assessment tactic themselves, or as a conversation starter and a way to engage in more discussion. I think to successfully implement this assessment tool, preparation is key. So this is applicable for many different assessment or engagement techniques. But as a teacher, I would want to have a significant understanding of what the significant and the major pros and cons are, and to have an idea of what some of the concerns that learners might bring up. I'd also want to be aware of what the points of contention are. What are the things that are going to be, say, button pushers for learners in the classroom? I want to take the time to ensure that there's a respectful classroom attitude in place, that we've had conversations about what being respectful and respectfully disagreeing looks like, and to ensure that we've got a sense that the classroom and the learners in that room will behave in a manner that supports differing viewpoints. The other part is setting aside enough time to have discussion about the pros and cons that were generated. So this discussion time supports feedback. Sharing feedback with learners can be done by providing comments on their individual submissions, asking questions about whether or not they considered various other elements. What about looking at different options or another person's perspective? Perhaps giving feedback about some of the underlying assumptions that were included in the assessments. And then in the larger group, I think sharing trends that the whole class came up with, perhaps identifying things that as a teacher I might consider were missed and weren't included. And then discussing the process and the model itself and seeing if there are ways that learners can use it in their future considerations for thinking and assessing community challenges. So for community development work, I love this concept. It asks people to take a step back and objectively consider both sides. It supports dialogue and encourages respectful conversation. So I am excited to try out this technique in a future community session, and I thank you for joining me today.